The Interstellar Dominion Council chamber was a monument to the arrogance of power. Its walls were carved from black celestite, a mineral found only on the conquered homeworld of the Vrithani, a species that no longer existed in any meaningful sense. They had been integrated into the Council's labor infrastructure 400 years ago. Their stone remained. Their name did not appear on any current map. Ambassador Kira Malone noticed things like that. She had been noticing things like that for 9 years. Kira was 38 years old, lean in the way that long years of stress and discipline produce, with close-cropped dark hair and the kind of gray eyes that people often described as calm and later reconsidered as calculating. She wore Earth's diplomatic uniform, deep navy blue with a single silver band at the collar, and she sat alone at the far end of a crescent-shaped table that seated 43 representatives of 43 species, all of whom outranked humanity in every metric the Council used to measure worth: tonnage of fleet, age of civilization, volume of territorial holdings, number of species absorbed. Humanity scored poorly on all of them. Officially, Supreme Arbiter Zeth Varun entered the chamber with the practiced gravity of someone who had never once doubted his right to enter a room and own it. He was tall, even by Kelvari standards, nearly 8 feet of pale blue-gray skin, layered ceremonial robes the color of deep space, and 4 arms that moved with a slow, deliberate elegance that his species used to signal authority the way humans used eye contact. He took his seat at the head of the crescent. He did not look at Kira immediately. That was intentional. She had learned to read the theater of this chamber the way a musician reads sheet music. Every beat deliberate, every pause composed. The session was called to order by the chamber warden. 43 species settled into attention. Translation nodes hummed to life along the ceiling, threading meaning through 17 different cognitive frameworks simultaneously. Zeth Varun folded 2 of his forehands on the table and spoke. The matter of Earth's continued provisional membership in the Interstellar Dominion has been reviewed by the full Council. His voice was even, almost kind, the way a surgeon's voice is kind when they are about to tell you something that will change your life. After considerable deliberation, the Council has reached a unanimous resolution. He paused. Kira breathed slowly. In through the nose 4 counts. Hold 4 counts. Out 4 counts. A technique she had learned from a former Special Forces officer who now worked in Earth's Deep Intelligence Division. Useful, the woman had told her, for moments when your body wants to panic and your job requires you not to. Earth's provisional territorial boundary will be reduced by 73%, effective within 20 standard cycles. All military vessels above Class 3 classification are to be transferred to Council authority within that same window. Earth will contribute 30% of its annual resource extraction to the Dominion Infrastructure Fund for a period no less than 50 standard years. He let that settle. Around the table, various representatives engaged in the body language of their species. The Dravari clicked their secondary mandibles in satisfaction. The Orvan delegate, a gray slug-like being of extraordinary age, pulsed bioluminescent approval. The Makari representative, a species that had spent 2 centuries under Council rule before being elevated to junior membership, stared at the table with the practiced stillness of something that had learned how to endure. Non-compliance, Zeth Varun added softly, will be understood as a declaration of open hostility against the Dominion and all its member species. The Council's response to such a declaration will be immediate, total, and without appeal. He looked at Kira then, for the first time, with the particular expression of someone who considers the conversation already finished. Ambassador Malone, the Council awaits Earth's acknowledgement. Kira looked at him. She held his gaze for a long moment, not in defiance, not in submission, but in the way someone looks at a thing they are committing to memory. Then she reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and withdrew a small flat device, brushed silver, no larger than a playing card. Council security had cataloged it on entry. Personal communications device, encrypted, diplomatic grade. Standard issue. Cleared. They had not understood what it was actually for. She pressed her thumb to its surface. A channel opened, routed through 23 relay points across 4 sectors, bouncing off a listening station hidden inside an asteroid designated as surveyed, inactive, and commercially worthless. She spoke one word. Now. She closed the channel and returned the device to her pocket. Zeth Varun's brow ridges lowered. Ambassador, the Council requires a formal— You'll have your answer, Kira said. Her voice was quiet and even. You sent your message. I've sent mine. A murmur moved through the chamber. The Dravari representative clicked in irritation. The Orvan pulsed uncertain yellow. Kira folded her hands on the table and waited. The story of Operation Iron Veil did not begin with a plan. It began with a question asked by a retired general named Seun Adebayo during a private meeting in Cape Town, 11 months after humanity's first confirmed contact with an alien civilization. The general had read the translated records of the Velhari Accords, the agreement that had formally brought the Makari species under Council authority. It was presented in Dominion historical records as a negotiated partnership. The general, who had spent 40 years studying the language of power, read it as a ransom note with better formatting. He asked his question at a meeting attended by 6 people, all of whom had clearances that did not officially exist. If they ever decide we're a problem, he said, how do we make sure they're wrong? That question became a program. The program became a budget. The budget became a generation. For 25 years, while Earth's diplomats smiled and traded and asked earnest questions about Dominion culture, a different layer of humanity worked in facilities that did not appear on any public record. They worked in orbital platforms registered as research stations. They worked in the deep rock of 3 different moons. They worked mostly in patience. Every piece of Dominion technology that passed through official channels was studied with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Not just to understand it, to find its edges. Every system has edges. Every design philosophy has assumptions baked into it, assumptions about what the enemy can and cannot do. The Dominion's warship design assumed that no species outside the Council had access to fold drive technology. Their shielding was constructed around known weapon frequencies from a database that hadn't been updated in 60 years. Their communication encryption was elegant, but built on mathematical assumptions that a particular human cryptographer, a quiet, unassuming woman from Osaka who preferred not to be named in any document, had quietly dismantled over 4 years of isolated work. Earth did not build a fleet to match the Dominion. That would have been impossible and, more importantly, unnecessary. Earth built a fleet designed specifically to defeat the Dominion. There is a difference. The warships were classified as decommissioned in official filings. The weapon systems were listed under research designations that revealed nothing. The crews trained in silence, in deep space, in the kind of operational security that only functions when everyone involved genuinely believes in what they're protecting. They called themselves the Iron Veil Crews. They did not wear it as a badge. They wore it the way a surgeon wears the knowledge of what they can do, quietly, responsibly, as a last resort held in careful hands. The duty commander who received Kira's signal that day was a woman named Captain Riel Osa. She was stationed in a facility built inside a decommissioned mining colony on the far side of Titan, and she had been waiting for that single word for 3 years. She did not celebrate. She did not pause. She entered a 16-digit authorization sequence, pressed her eye to the biometric scanner, and spoke to her assembled command team in a voice as level as still water. Iron Veil is active. All fleets confirm positioning. Signal all forward elements. Execute on my mark. She took one breath. Mark. In the cold silence of space, across 11 star systems and 47 hidden coordinates, engines came alive. Not loudly. Vacuum does not carry sound. But they came alive. Back in the council chamber, 6 minutes had passed. Zeth Varun was no longer projecting patience. His secondary arms had crossed over his chest, a Kelvari posture that his junior staff recognized as contained anger. Around the table, the mood had shifted from celebratory to watchful. Something was wrong. No one could name it yet, but it was the kind of wrong that old predator instincts register before the conscious mind catches up. The chamber's communications officer entered through the side door at a pace that was 2 steps short of running. Supreme Arbiter. His voice was carefully controlled. Long-range sensors are tracking unregistered contacts at multiple locations. Initial count. Correction, the count is still updating. We have unregistered vessels appearing at the Dravari communication relay, the Orvan trade corridor, the forward defense station at Sector 9, and... He paused, reading his display. And here. 17 contacts on direct approach to the station. The chamber erupted. Zeth Varun raised all 4 hands for silence and got it through sheer force of presence. He looked at Kira. She was the only person in the room who had not moved. Species identification, he said. The communications officer looked at his screen. Then he looked up. Human, sir. But the ship configurations, they don't match anything in our registry. These vessels are not Earth's official fleet. Then what are they? Kira answered before the officer could speculate. They're our real fleet, she said simply. You've been counting our older ships. We kept the new ones somewhere quieter. The Dravari representative rose to his feet. This is an act of war. No, Kira said, still quiet, still even. Your resolution was an act of war. We simply made sure we were ready for it before you delivered it. She looked at Zeth Varun then, and there was no anger in her face, no triumph, nothing hot or reactive. Just the clear, steady attention of someone stating a fact to someone who needs to hear it. You looked at humanity and saw a young species, small fleet, new to the galaxy, grateful for a seat at the table. She paused. That's what we needed you to see. An alert sounded, then 2 more. The tactical display at the head of the chamber bloomed with contact markers, dozens, then more, positioned at every significant Dominion military coordinate across the sector. Not attacking, not yet. Just there, holding, waiting, the way humanity had always been best at waiting. Zeth Varun stood very still, looking at a display that was rearranging everything he understood about the balance of power in this galaxy. The chamber was silent. Kira Malone placed both hands flat on the table and held his gaze. You'll want to cancel that resolution, she said. The silence in the council chamber lasted exactly 11 seconds. Kira Malone counted them. She had spent 9 years learning to find stillness in rooms that did not want to be still, and she used that stillness now the way a surgeon uses a scalpel, precisely with purpose to cut through to what mattered. On the tactical display at the chamber's head, 49 red markers held position across 11 star systems. They did not advance. They did not power weapons to active fire configuration. They simply existed, visible on every sensor grid, present at every coordinate that the Dominion had spent 4 centuries constructing into an empire. Supreme Arbiter Zeth Varun was not a man who showed fear. He had risen to the highest seat in galactic governance through a combination of genuine brilliance, ruthless patience, and an absolute refusal to let anything on his face betray what was happening in his mind. But Kira had studied him for 9 years. She watched him look at the tactical display and process what he was seeing, and she saw the exact moment, a 0.3-second stillness in his upper hands, a micro-flattening of the brow ridges, when the Arbiter understood that what he was looking at was not a bluff. Admiral Torvin, he said. The Kelvari Fleet Admiral seated on the military advisory panel sat forward. He was old even by Kelvari standards, heavy with authority, with the kind of experienced military mind that Kira had genuinely respected when she first met him years ago. He was pulling the tactical overlay apart with practiced efficiency, zooming, cross-referencing, running configurations against the Dominion's registry database. Those are fold-capable warships, the Admiral said, and his voice carried the flat, careful tone of a man who is choosing his next words with great deliberateness. Class 6 and above. The weapons arrays I'm reading, they're using a frequency band we don't have a countermeasure for. He paused. The shield configurations are arbiter, they've built around our weapon frequencies. These ships are specifically designed to fight us. Another alert. The Dravari communication relay in Sector 4 had gone offline. Not destroyed, not damaged, jammed. A clean, total communications blackout. Precise. Surgical. They're not attacking, said the Orvan delegate, pulsing an uncertain amber green. They could be attacking. Why are they not attacking? Kira answered, because the question deserved an honest answer. Because we're not here to destroy you, she said. We're here to make sure you understand that you can't destroy us. There's a difference. We'd prefer you learned it without anyone dying. Zeth Varun turned from the display and looked at her fully. The long, measuring look of a mind recalibrating. How long? He asked. It was a precise question. It did not ask what or why. It asked the one thing that a strategist needed to understand when faced with the thing Zeth Varun was currently facing. 25 years, Kira said. The number moved through the chamber in ways different species processed differently. The Makari delegate, the ones who had spent 2 centuries under Dominion rule before their elevation, went very still in a way that Kira read as recognition. They knew what it was to survive through patience. They recognized it in someone else. The Dravari representative, still standing, clicked his mandibles in what might have been fury, or might have been the grinding recalculation of a military mind that had just been handed an unwelcome homework problem. While you were sending trade envoys, the Dravari said. While you were asking about our cultural festivals and requesting archive access to our historical records. We were reading them, Kira confirmed. Your history, your wars. Every species the Council has absorbed or dismantled or reclassified as a protected labor resource. We were reading very carefully. She let that sit for a moment. The Vrithani, she said. The Pelosi, the Ahunai, the Makari. Forgive me, Representative Sunoth. I know your situation is different now. The Makari delegate gave a slow nod that contained a great deal of meaning. 17 species in 300 years. Absorbed, reduced, renamed. Economically stripped in the name of infrastructure fund contributions that somehow always built infrastructure in Kelvari space. She looked at Zeth Varun. We noticed. You came to this council in good faith. We came to this council understanding exactly what kind of institution it was, Kira said, and for the first time there was a temperature to her voice. Not anger, but something harder and more durable than anger. Clarity. And we decided that the way to survive it was not to trust it. It was to make ourselves impossible to consume. Admiral Torvin spoke without looking up from his tactical display. The positioning. Every strategic coordinate we hold, how did you know them? Archive access, Kira said simply. Historical records. 25 years of careful reading. She paused. You were very thorough record keepers. It made our job easier. Torvin closed his display and sat back. He made a sound that in Kelvari carried the meaning of, I have been a professional my entire life and I am experiencing a professional emotion right now, and said nothing further. Zeth Varun was quiet for a long moment. The chamber held its breath. 43 species. Centuries of accumulated hierarchy. A governance structure that had not been seriously challenged since the Dravari expansion wars, and that challenge had ended with the Challenger's homeworld being reclassified as a military reserve. What do you want? Zeth Varun asked. It was, Kira thought, the first genuinely honest thing he had said all day. She had prepared the answer 9 years ago. She had revised it 4 times. She had discussed it with the 6 people who knew the full scope of Iron Veil, with the generals and cryptographers and the quiet woman from Osaka, who had broken the Dominion's encryption with 4 years of isolated mathematics. They had all agreed on the shape of it. The resolution you passed today is cancelled, Kira said. Earth's territorial boundaries remain intact. Our fleet remains our fleet. She kept her voice level, deliberate, not triumphant. This was not a victory speech. It was a terms document. The Dominion Infrastructure Fund is dissolved. Its assets are audited by an independent body composed of member species with no current seat on the primary council. That includes the Makari, the surviving Ahunai communities in Sector 7, and 4 other species your records list as protected but function as indentured. The audit findings are made public. You're asking us to dismantle? I'm telling you what happens, Kira said. You asked what we want. That's what we want. The Council continues to exist. Governance of a multi-species galaxy is genuinely complex, and something like it is probably necessary. But not this version of it. She looked around the chamber, not at Zeth Varun, but at the others. The Makari delegate. The Orvan, who were old enough to remember what the Dominion looked like before Kelvari dominance calcified its structure. The smaller species near the outer curve of the table, the ones who never spoke in open session, whose votes had been functionally meaningless for generations. There are 43 species in this chamber, Kira said. 4 of them make every meaningful decision. That's not governance. That's a different arrangement with a longer table. Another alert. Then confirmation from Earth's Fleet Command. All positioning coordinates held. No hostile action taken by any Dominion vessel. They were standing down, not in defeat, but in the particular stillness of military professionals who have run the calculation and found only one viable outcome. Torvin had run it first. She could see it in his posture. He was a professional. Professionals accepted reality faster than politicians because reality in their field arrived with mass and velocity. Zeth Varun sat down. It was a small movement and a large one. He sat down and placed 2 of his 4 hands on the table and looked at the tactical display for a long, quiet moment. You intend to monitor compliance, he said. Our fleet will remain in position for 30 standard cycles, Kira confirmed. After that, we return to normal patrol patterns. If the audit proceeds, if the structural changes are implemented, the fleet goes back to being invisible. She paused. We're good at invisible. A sound moved through the chamber. It took Kira a moment to identify it because she had never heard it in this room before. It was the sound of the smaller species, the ones who sat at the outer curve and never spoke, exhaling. The Makari representative, Sunoth, looked across the table at Kira with an expression that did not translate easily, but that contained somewhere in it the weight of 200 years. We knew, Sunoth said quietly. Some of us suspected that humanity was quieter than it appeared. A pause. We hoped. I know, Kira said. She had read their records too. The dismantling of the Dominion Council in its existing form took 14 standard months. It was not clean. It was not simple. There were 3 sessions where representatives walked out, 2 where the proceedings had to be suspended overnight because the legal frameworks being negotiated didn't have precedent in 400 years of council history, and 1 memorable afternoon where the Dravhari delegation threw a procedural document across the chamber floor and had to be formally reminded that the fleet was still positioned at their forward staging area. It was messy and difficult and human, in the way that things built to last tend to be. Earth's Iron Veil fleet maintained its positions for 28 of the promised 30 cycles, then pulled back to standard patrol range. It did not disappear. Everyone now knew it existed. But it settled into a pattern that communicated, we are here without communicating. We are threatening. The audit of the Infrastructure Fund took 8 months and produced findings that surprised no one who had read the historical records carefully and genuinely horrified the species that hadn't known how to. The Ahunai communities in Sector 7, numbering some 400,000 individuals across 6 habitats, listed in Dominion records as protected cultural preservation groups, were reclassified as a sovereign species. They were given a seat at the restructured council table. Their representative, a woman of 70 with the careful eyes of someone who had never expected this moment, wept during the formal recognition ceremony. Kira was not there. She had returned to Earth 6 weeks earlier, quietly, on a standard diplomatic transport. There was a reception at the Diplomatic Corps headquarters in Geneva that she attended for 45 minutes before slipping out and going home. Home was a small apartment in Lisbon overlooking the river. She had not spent more than 3 consecutive weeks there in 9 years. She spent 4 months there now. She read. She walked along the water in the evenings. She called her brother in Lagos every Sunday. One evening, 6 weeks after her return, she received a message from Dr. Suna Adebayo, retired general, now 81 years old, living in Cape Town. He was the man who had asked the question that started everything. "How does it feel?" the message read, "to have been the answer?" She thought about it for a long time, watching the Tagus River catch the last of the evening light. She wrote back one line, "Like something that needed to be done, finally done." She set down her device and watched the river for a while longer. The stars were coming out above the city, bright and indifferent and vast. They were still the same stars. But humanity moved through them differently now. Not as a newcomer asking permission, not as a threat demanding dominance, but as something older than the dominion had ever given them credit for. Something patient, something that had been here all along, quietly reading the records, quietly building toward the moment when being underestimated would no longer be a disadvantage. The moment had come. The stars remembered.